swap on SC400 today. This is my SC400 I purchased about a year ago. I got it from the original owner. Like, she meticulously took great care of this thing. Like, garage kept, always maintained. Like, she even named it. Its name is Lance. So I call it Lance now. I even got the license plate, Lance, just because it was, you know, I had to carry on the tradition. She took such good care of this car, and all she wanted somebody to do was take as good care of it as she did. So I feel like it's in my duty to do that. So here's Lance. Anyways, we're going to be doing the manual swap today. Let's take a look at what we got. Alright, so we got a CD009. I picked this up for 750 bucks. This is obviously another CD bell housing. To utilize this kit, we have to cut the bell housing off. This is off my other car, which was a brand new CD009. We're going to be using the Collins adapter. So once you cut it off, you will actually bolt it up in there, and then you'll use the factory bell housing using a T56 slave. While we're in there, we're going to replace the output seal on the transmission, and then do a brand new rear main seal on the engine. So there's a company called Corn Carbon that makes this piece for the SE, because they don't make the OEM one anymore, and it's actually carbon fiber, but it's painted black to make it look factory. But you can order it in raw carbon if you wanted. And I also found, since I'm using the Serial 9 shifter, it uses Nissan threads, but I found this Mazda shifter from like Lithuania, and it's got the 6-speed. It looks like super factory, and I think it's gonna look sick in the car. So I'm really excited for that. So. We got the exhaust and the drive shaft out, so I think we got to do the shift linkage and then probably the torque converter bolts. This is my first SC manual swap. I've done a lot of IS ones. If it was an IS, I'd probably do it with my eyes closed, but this one's a learning experience. It's not bad, but we're gonna keep going. Alright, so this is a little crazy contraption here. Let me show you. Let me pull it out first. So on the SE, this is much harder to get to the torque converter bolts because of the cross member. So you got to take an extension and a swivel 14, but attach them separate. Well, I guess you could attach it like this and go through here, and then you can get to the bolt. But it's a tight angle, so. Alright, so I got all the wiring disconnected from the transmission, and now I'm going to do the bell housing bolts. And I use this thing here, which is a blue point, and it's a 1/2 inch to 3/8 extension, which helps you get to especially the top bell housing bolts, like the 17s up top with a swivel. So definitely recommend it. I mean, you don't have to get the snap-on or the blue point, but if you can find one, that's a 1/2 inch to 3/8, and this looks like it's about 36 inches. So let's get the training out. So most of the bolts that I've taken out so far, like, you don't reuse again, but you want to save the bell housing bolts because you're going to reuse the factory bell housing. So keep that in mind. So keep these safe somewhere. Alright, we got the trans out. Now we need to take the bell housing off of this transmission, your old one. If you look up here, there'll be a code. This one's a U1. When you order your kit, it'll tell you like what years have what. I think there's U1 and U2, but this is an early model, so it's U1. So, but first we got to take the torque converter out. Be careful because there is a bunch of fluid in here. Alright, so now we can get to our bell housing bolts. Alright, so now I'm marking the where I got to cut the bell housing off. I don't remember the exact depth that's on the website, but I've done it so many times that I pretty much know exactly where to cut. So I'm going to mark it and cut this bell housing off and get it ready for the new one. And actually there's a step a lot of people miss when installing the adapter plate that I'm going to show you what to do. It's actually very important. If you ever installed this adapter plate and didn't have 5th gear, I'll show you why. Alright. Shout out to Milwaukee for making the best stuff ever. Even markers. So I think it's like an 1/8 inch. If I'm wrong, I'll put the correct measurement. But it's from like this ridge. Usually it's like right on the inside of this ridge here that you cut. And I usually cut these off too because those will be in the way and you don't need them. And yeah, so. Be sure to always wear your Milwaukee safety glasses when you're using Ryobi products. Protected by the best. Alright, I got everything cut off. If you want to, you can just take the grinding part and just smooth your lines or edges. I'm just going to do that just so you know there's no sharp points or anything like that. So, like I said, optional, but I'm going to do it to make it a little bit cleaner. Have to call in the big gun. Just taking off any unnecessary brackets that I don't need. Alright, so now I'm going to remove the shift linkage because we don't need this because we're using the CD009 shifter. Alright, so I'm going to start installing some of the CD009 bits. This piece goes on first. It actually did come with a roll pin, so you don't need to save the factory one. It was that stupid S1 sequential shifter that you needed to save the factory one for. So, but CD009, they give you one. Alright, I did lube this shaft a little bit to help it slide on there. I like to tap it in here first a little bit, and then you can line it up, and then I just go in. Alright, so this is usually the trickiest part. It's a lot harder if it's in the car, but basically you have to push like the shifter down, like you would be going to reverse, and then you're gonna get under that little notch that we just installed. Alright, after some fighting, I got it on, so it just basically slides on there. There was a little lube on there too. It's got multiple holes depending on which transmission you have. This is a later CD009, so but if you have an early one, this works too. So, alright, so it comes with these spacers you'll need on the top. There's an extra set of spacers it comes with you would only need on the side if you had the early transmission. So since I don't, I won't need those. So I'm just going to slide these in, and then we can bolt it down. Or drop it. Alright, we got it strapped up here just so we can install the adapter plate so we don't have to work on the floor like we were, which really hurt our knees because we're old. But anyway, some of you might ask like why the CD009 shifter with the Collins adapter. Just personal preference. I've used the Collins shifter. I had, if you know, some of you have been around on the channel, I've had the S1 sequential shifter for the CD and just had really bad luck with that one. So just because something's expensive doesn't mean it's the best. So I tried the CD009 after that one, and it's been my favorite one since. So I just stick with it. I like it. It's easy to get into fifth gear. It's got the reverse lockout. So, alright, so our next step is going to be to remove this. This is where your adapter plate's going to bolt to. So we'll have to remove this, clean the surface, put some sealant on there. And before we do that though, I'm going to show you what most people forget to do. It's in the instructions somewhere, but it's just kind of overlooked. So I'm going to show you what not to do or what not to forget, because you will not have fifth gear if you don't do this step. So. Alright, so this piece is basically to adjust where your shifter is going to be. You could have it set here and have the shifter further back depending on what chassis you have. I'm pretty sure this one's going to need to be the closest, but I'm not going to install this part yet, but I'm just putting this on temporarily because right now we need to get it in 5th gear. So that was 4th, that's 3rd, here's neutral, there's 5th. And why we need to get it into 5th, I'll show you up here. So you see this rod right here. We need to just basically shave it down a little bit and round it off. It's got like a flat tip, almost comes to a triangle. So you'll see how when you go into 5th gear that comes out. And if you don't do this, it'll hit the back of the adapter plate and possibly prevent you from going into 5th gear. You know, I actually did this myself once. I saw Taylor Ray actually did it to his Miata at one point as well. But you know, 5th gear is obviously not that important when you have a drift car, but this is going to be a street car / drift car, so I want to have 5th gear. So we're going to shave this down and clearance it. Alright, I covered this bearing as much as I could. I don't want to get dirt in there, so, or metal debris. Alright, so I got it flattened pretty good, but now I'm just kind of round off those edges to clean it up. So. Alright, you can see it's a lot rounder. It used to be a lot pointier when I started. So I'm pretty confident, since I've done this a couple times, that that's good enough. But if you're not confident, dry fit the adapter and just make sure it goes into 5th gear. You'll know when it just clicks in or it won't click in. So it's pretty obvious. Alright, here's the adapter plate. There is a seal here, so make sure you put some lube on there before you put it on. We're going to put our sealant on. I think I'm going to do it on the tranny side first, just because it's a more stationary object. So yeah, let's get it sealed up. Just lubing my shaft here. Alright, it comes with its own bolts. You're going to have like a tapered Allen. There's going to be long and short. It's pretty obvious where the long ones will go and the short ones. I think there's only 2 short ones, which go over here. Alright, so like I said, I'm just going to double check to make sure it goes into 5th. So there. 3rd. 5th. Alright, so basically what's left is we got to do the slave and then the bell housing. I'm going to do the slave, but I'm going to wait on the bell housing just because I know with the JZ bell housing, it has like notches on the inside that you have to grind out if you run a certain clutch. So I'm going to bolt the clutch onto the engine on this first, and then bolt the bell housing to the engine and just make sure it spins freely so we don't run into any issues. Alright, so like what I was saying is like these little nubs right here, they're pretty sure they're a lot bigger on the JZ bell housings, but you have to grind them down to fit the clutch. I'm not positive on this yet, but I'm going to double check and make sure. So I will keep you posted and let you know. if it is needed. This is basically a T56 slave. So, I mean, it is a T56 slave, and that's what this kit uses. If you run the twin disc setup, you'll need the tilt and slave. Alright, so I kind of stuffed up the automatic trans wiring up there so I can grab it later, because we're going to have to jump the park neutral switch for it to start. And then I do want to wire the reverse switch into this. The one on the transmission looks broken, like all the ones I buy used are. So I might take it out of the red car, my drift car, since I don't really need the reverse lights. But I want the reverse lights to work in this, so I'll probably do that once I get everything installed and get that wired in. But for now, I'm going to take off the flex plate because we're going to replace the rear main seal. Alright, so I popped the seal out. It's definitely an aftermarket seal. This does not look OEM. It's got like a metal protector on the outside of it, which is kind of weird. I normally use like the self tappers and yank them out, but I couldn't do it with that metal ring on there. So, but here's the OEM, brand new Toyota. Just make sure we put a little lube on it. These aren't the easiest to install, but once you get them going, pretty good. Okay. I obviously got to put it in, push it in more, but I need some other tools. Alright, so I didn't have the right, obviously, seal installer that big, so what I did was use the 1/4 inch extension and just tapped a little by little in each spot. You don't want to go too much because it'll pop out. This seemed to go in much easier than the JZ ones I've done, so that was kind of nice. Some people have taken this whole plate off and resealed it, but then I don't like that because then you don't get it's possible you don't get a proper like sealing surface with the lower oil pan, because that also seals there. So I prefer just to do the seal while I have the transmission out. If I was taking the oil pan off, then yeah, I would do it that way. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to put in is the pilot bushing. What I like to do though is just clean inside here with a little scuff pad and some brake cleaner, just to clean off any surface rust that's in there. You don't want to do too much or else it's going to be too loose, but I'm not worried about this taking off too much material. And then I'm going to put a little lube on this as well, and then we're going to hammer it in. Alright, we got our Collins flywheel. That's specific obviously for this kit, so it's a certain depth, so it'll only probably work with this kit, so don't mix and match. Alright, getting the flywheel was a little pain. I kind of used the bolts to pull it in a little bit to get it flush. Now it's good, so I took them back out, and a real important part with flywheel bolts, thread locker. Do not forget the thread locker. So. cleaning off any of the oils off the surface before we put the clutch on. This was a used clutch that I had. I put it on my 2J, but it made too much torque for this clutch. It's a stage 3, so I went the stage 4 for that. This one holds, I think, like 360, 380 foot-pounds, so it should be plenty for this engine. So that's why it has some wear and tear marks on it. Another thing for the clutch, I like to do thread locker as well. Any kind of drive line bolt, I'm going to use thread locker because I don't want it to back out. Alright, so I'm getting ready to remove the automatic shifter to make room for the manual shifter, and then we're going to determine whether or not we have to cut anything. So basically, I already started. I pulled this cup holder out, it just pops out. There's 2 screws there, which I took out already. And then you pop this thing down after you put it in neutral, and you'll take these 2 screws out. So I'm going to do that now. Alright, so I got those screws out. This will just slide right off. And then you should be able to pull this piece off and then disconnect the connectors. Alright, so once you get that out, you're going to have a number of screws. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 Phillips. We're going to take those out now. Alright, I got all those screws out. Now this, I already popped it out because I couldn't hold the camera at the same time. But just be careful, all this stuff is very old and brittle. There'll be a couple connectors to disconnect. And then once this is out, I think we can get the shifter out, but we'll see. Alright, well, I had to take the radio out and basically almost pull the center console all the way out to get this big fella, dumb fella out. Judging by the size of that hole, it would basically be a miracle if it lines up perfect, but I'm gonna guess that we're gonna have to cut it, but like I said, we'll see. Alright, so now I'm just fitting the bell housing just to make sure we clear the clutch. So it looks like we got plenty of clearance in there with this bell housing and clutch, so nothing to worry about. Alright, now let's put it on the tranny.
Bottom ones are 17s and the tops are 14.
Alright, one thing I did that I didn't show, I installed the clutch line. It's going to be much easier. You can just feed it up as you put the transmission up. I do want to show you something. So when you do install it, it's an 11mm on the clutch line side, but make sure you hold this. You don't want this to spin, or else you could damage the slave. So just make sure you hold that and then tighten that, and then we're going to set this on top and feed it up to where it needs to go as we go up. Alright, we're bolting our mount to the transmission now. This comes with the kit provided by Collins. It's nice that it's feels like it's rubber. It's not like super solid, so you'll have some play, so which is nice. Also, like this shifter couldn't fit more perfect. Like, look at that. Tell me that is not perfect. Like it was meant to be. We might have to cut a little bit in the front because I know to adjust the reverse lockout there's 3 10s, and it feels like that front 10 might just be under the sheet metal, but it'll be like the tiniest little notch. So So you're gonna loosely install these. Whoops. Alright, you loosely install them so then you can see where your bolts are gonna line up. And at this point I think you're gonna use the factory bolt holes. That's real long. Wonder if those were supposed to go the other way. That makes sense though. Just cut them. Alright, so we got the trans bolted in, we're good. I think we're going to do the drive shaft next, but first we're going to replace the seal that I got from Nissan. And once I do the drive shaft, before I put the exhaust on, I'm going to make sure I can pull everything up top, like the clutch line and the transmission harness, to access all that stuff. Like I said, eventually I'm going to do the reverse switch to the lights, but this one's broken, so I'll either get a new one or swap it for another trans. Seals out. Seals in. Alright, so this is the drive shaft adapter, because it uses the drive shaft as a 4-bolt like typical cars, but these are like weird 3-6 bolt things. So it's called like a guibo. So this gets rid of the rubber piece, which tends to fail. So there's 2 separate bolt patterns in here. I assume one's probably for a GS or a different diff, but only one will line up with your diff, and you'll screw these in and then you'll put nuts on the back side. So there's only 3 of the Allens that'll actually go in for your diff. Alright, so there's the 3 Allens, they recess in. Your drive shaft will bolt into these threaded holes. These other 3 are for a different diff. These ones work for mine. And they actually thread into the billet piece. Oh, sorry, where am I? They thread into here, but then you have to put the nuts on the back side. You can see that, yeah. So, and you always put the washer with the nut. Wash your nuts. I'd normally put thread locker on these 2 since it's going into like a billet piece, but we're all out and we're actually not going to drive the car from here. We're going to tow it to where I work to finish the last little bits of it. So if you're installing this for good, I would put some thread locker on these just so they don't back out. Alright, so I pulled my clutch line up. I ran it to about where it's going to be. I don't have my pedal yet, but like I said, we're going to bring it to where I work and finish the last little bits there. I did pull the transmission harness on this gray plug. You're going to have to jump these 2 for the park neutral switch. It'll be a black wire and a black and white wire. If you don't do that, the car's not going to crank over because it will think it's in drive. So you'll have to jump those 2 wires, and it should basically start after that. And then if you want, you can wire the reverse switch. So you can see almost like how perfect that was. Just like this little bit right here is all we're going to trim. And I'm just going to give myself a little space and go around there, and then it should be perfect, and we can adjust the reverse lockout. But like seriously, like that is just damn near perfect. I've never had one that was that close. Whew. And that's all we needed. Just doing a test jump to see if it'll start, because we want to at least try to get the car on the trailer so we can get it to my work. Alright, so we're going to remove the brake pedal now, and you have to take this pin out, slide this pin, and then there's a bolt up top, which that ECU will have to be removed. Over to the left, you'll see where we'll put the clutch master cylinder. So now we're going to loosen that bolt that holds the brake pedal in. I realized that there was a ECU in the way, so right there you see we removed that ECU, and then you're able to get the brake pedal out. Once you have the brake pedal out, you'll see that you'll need this sleeve here to swap over to your new brake pedal. I used a OEM SC400 manual brake pedal, and so I'll just swap these sleeves over to the pedal itself. And you'll also need to get a clip for the brake switch that you'll see right there at the top. I'll show you. We didn't have an OEM one in stock, so I was able to use another clip I had laying around that would work. So I put that in there. There's the brake pedal installed. I used a different clutch pad from a Subaru, but now we're going to drill our hole for a 1.5 inch for the clutch master cylinder. There's our clutch pedal. I also used the Subaru clutch pad for that. We had some pedals laying around the shop that I was able to use. I might switch to the factory, but now we're all ready to install our clutch master cylinder. And we install that, and there's our clutch pedal. It looks a little high and crooked there, but it wasn't its final position. Alright, so one issue I ran into was on the factory bezel, it had a spot for the track off button. And since I'm going to be drifting this from time to time, I wanted to keep the track off button, but the manual bezel doesn't have a spot for it. So I had an idea where I basically cut it out to fit into the ashtray. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. So there it is, installed. I think it looks pretty good. Came out good, sleek. You can still close the lid. Awesome.
So, thank you for subscribing. Bye. 하나 셔유 청기 싫어.